to stop. Tell them I've done nothing. Look at me. Look at what you are doing to me.
For 7 years, the river has been silent.
I have done nothing.
Before we continue, if you love powerful African stories like this one, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss what happens next. Before you judge the people of Oduwa, understand this: fear makes monsters out of ordinary men. But to understand why the river called Amara daughter, we must go back 7 years to the beginning of the silence and to the girl nobody thought was worth protecting. Oduwa had once been a village blessed beyond most. Its soil was dark and rich, its river never dry, even in the harshest season. Farmers spoke of it the way travelers speak of paradise. Then, 7 years ago, the rains simply stopped. At first the elders called it a passing season, but the dry season stretched into a dry year, and the dry year stretched into 7. Fields that once fed the whole village turned to brittle stalks. Wells cracked at the bottom, revealing nothing but dust. "Nothing," one woman muttered, staring into an empty well. "Still nothing." "My children cried themselves to sleep again last night," said another. "Hunger does not let them rest." Livestock died in the fields where they stood. Families who had farmed the same land for generations packed what little they had and left. Those who remained grew desperate, and desperate people are the easiest to convince of anything, even the necessity of murder, if it is dressed in the robes of tradition. "The river is angry," a man muttered bitterly to his neighbor. "Everyone knows it. The elders say so. The river goddess has turned her face from us," an elder said from somewhere in the background. "We have offended her. Only a sacrifice can restore her favor." No one asked what offense had been committed, or why a goddess who had blessed Oduwa for generations would suddenly demand blood. They simply believed, because believing was easier than searching for the truth, and the truth was far more dangerous than any curse. While the village elders whispered of curses and sacrifice, one girl rose before the sun each morning, unaware that she carried the very secret they feared most. Her name was Amara, 20 years old, an orphan since childhood, raised, if it could be called that, in the house of her uncle, Ankem. She was always the first to wake and the last to sleep. Before the roosters even considered crowing, Amara was already walking the long path to the stream, 2 clay pots balanced against her hips. "Just one more trip," she hummed softly to herself, "alone, and then the compound needs sweeping." By the time the rest of the household stirred, Amara had already fetched water twice, swept the compound, and started the fire for the morning meal. Her cousins, Uncle Nkem's children, woke to a home already prepared for them, a comfort they never thanked her for. "Is the food ready?" "I'm hungry," Chidinma said, stretching, walking past Amara without looking at her. "Almost. A few more minutes," Amara answered quietly. "A few more minutes?" Ebuka laughed cruelly. "What else does she have to do with her time? It's not like she has a husband waiting, or a family of her own to worry about." Amara said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence hurt less than arguing with people who had already decided who she was. "Chidinma, Ebuka, enough. Eat your food," Uncle Kem said gruffly, entering the compound. It was the closest thing to defense he ever offered her. Not concerned for her feelings, only irritation at the noise. Still, Amara worked without complaint, in the fields under the punishing sun, mending clothes by firelight when her eyes grew heavy, carrying the weight of an entire household on shoulders that had never once been offered rest. And through it all, she remained kind, to the children who mocked her, to the elders who ignored her, to the uncle who saw her more as an obligation than as family. It was this kindness, quiet and unbroken, that would one day prove far more powerful than any crown. Each night, after the compound fell silent, Amara would retreat to the small mat in the corner of the hut that was hers alone, and there, in the dim light of a dying fire, remove a small pendant from beneath her wrapper, the only thing she owned that had once belonged to her mother. It was a dark stone, smooth from years of touch, engraved with a symbol she had never been able to identify, a crescent moon cradling what looked almost like a crown, though she had never dared to think of it that way. "I wish you were here to tell me what this means, Mama," she whispered, running her thumb over the stone. She remembered so little of her mother, a warm voice, the smell of shea butter and smoke, and one memory that never faded, no matter how many years passed, her mother's face, pale with sickness, gripping Amara's small hands with a strength that seemed impossible for someone so frail. "Amara, listen to me," her mother had said, weak but urgent. "Whatever happens, whatever they tell you, whatever they call you, never remove this necklace. Do you understand me? Never." "Why, Mama?" the small girl she had once been had asked. "One day you will understand. One day it will tell you who you truly are." Amara had been 6 years old when her mother died. She had carried those words, and this necklace, for 14 years since, never understanding why it mattered so much. She traced the symbol again in the firelight. "Who am I truly, Mama?" she asked softly to herself. She had no way of knowing that the very people plotting against her, only a short distance away, were asking themselves the exact same question, and trembling at the answer they feared. That same night, while Amara slept with her secret pressed against her chest, the village elders gathered in the largest hut in Oduwa, a meeting that would decide her fate before she ever knew it was being discussed. Chief Obasi sat at the head of the circle, his eyes sharp with the calculation of a man who had spent decades learning how to bend a room to his will. Elder Bako sat close beside him, restless. 7 years, Chief Obasi began, addressing the gathered elders. 7 years of dying crops and empty wells. The people are losing patience. Some are beginning to whisper that we, the elders, have failed them. "What more can we do, Chief?" one elder asked. "We have prayed. We have offered yams, goats, palm wine." "Offerings of goats and yams have done nothing," Elder Bako cut in, sharp. "The river demands more." A heavy silence fell over the hut. Murmurs of unease rippled through the circle. A young father spoke up first, his voice tight with fear. "My children are the only wealth I have left," he said. "I will not offer one of them to the river, Chief. I would rather starve first." Chief Obasi raised a hand, silencing the growing protest. He had anticipated this resistance. He had, in fact, been counting on it. "No one is asking any of you to give up your children," he said, calm and deliberate. He let the words settle. Then, slowly, deliberately, he spoke the sentence that would set everything in motion. "There is one girl in this village who has no parents, no father to protect her claim, no mother to grieve her loss. A girl the village has fed and sheltered out of charity for 20 years, with nothing given back in return." No one needed to ask her name. Every face in that circle turned inward, each elder silently arriving at the same conclusion. Amara. An orphan, Chief Obasi went on, nodding slowly. Unmarried. No children to mourn her, no husband to demand justice. If any life in this village can be offered without tearing a family apart, it is hers. The young father who had spoken so passionately for his own children now sat quietly, relief plain and shameful on his face. It is a terrible truth about fear. It does not make people brave. It only makes them grateful the sacrifice is not their own. Then it is settled, Elder Bako said, satisfied. We bring this proposal to Nkem in the morning. One by one, the elders nodded. Some out of genuine belief in the ritual, others simply relieved their own children would sleep safely tonight. None of them, in that moment, understood the true danger of what they were agreeing to. After the council dispersed, and the other elders returned to their homes, Chief Obasi remained behind, along with the one man who knew the real reason behind his urgency. Elder Bako closed the hut's entrance, pulling the woven mat across the doorway, ensuring no wandering ear could catch what was about to be said. You spoke of tradition to the others, he said, dropping the calm mask entirely. But we both know the truth has nothing to do with rain. Keep your voice down, Chief Obasi answered, sighing, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. Her mother was connected to the old royal house. You know this as well as I do. I know the rumors. I never confirmed them. I confirmed them myself years ago, Obasi said, turning, grim. Before the girl's mother fell ill and died, I saw the mark on her, the same crescent birthmark the old bloodline always carried. Elder Bako's jaw tightened. He had suspected as much for years, but hearing it spoken aloud made the danger suddenly, terribly real. Then the girl, he started, low, urgent. Carries the same mark, Obasi finished. I have seen it myself, on her shoulder, when she was a child bathing at the stream. I have said nothing all these years, hoping the bloodline would fade into obscurity, hoping no one would ever think to look. What if the girl is truly the last blood of the old royal house? The question hung in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Chief Obasi's hands, folded behind his back, tightened until his knuckles paled. Then she must never live long enough to find out, he said, his voice hardening. There it was, the true reason behind 7 years of manufactured drought, 7 years of blaming an innocent river for a crime committed by greedy men. The sacrifice was never about appeasing a goddess. It was about silencing a girl before she could ever learn the truth of who she was, and what that truth would mean for the men who had stolen everything from her family. Then we move quickly, Elder Bako said, nodding slowly, his resolve hardening. Before doubt spreads, before anyone starts asking the questions we cannot answer, the river will take her secret with her, Obasi said quietly, almost to himself, and Oduwa will finally have its reign again, or the people will believe so, long enough for us to remain in power. What Chief Obasi did not yet understand, what no man who steals from the sacred ever understands until it is far too late, is that some secrets do not stay buried simply because the ground has been packed down over them. Some secrets have a way of rising, exactly when the guilty least expect it. The following morning, before Amara had even finished her first trip to the stream, Chief Obasi and Elder Bako arrived at Uncle Ninkem's compound, their expressions carefully arranged into masks of solemn concern. Chief Obasi, Elder Bako, this is an honor, Ninkem said, surprised, wiping his hands on his wrapper. What brings you to my home so early? Ninkem, we come with a heavy matter, Obasi said gravely, one that concerns the survival of this entire village, and, if you allow it, the future of your family as well. Nkem's brow furrowed with unease. He gestured for the 2 men to sit, calling for palm wine to be brought, though his hands trembled slightly as he did. The council has decided, Elder Bako said. The river demands a sacrifice, a pure, unmarried life, freely offered, to restore the rains and save Oduwa from complete ruin. And what does this have to do with me? Nkem asked, uneasy. Your niece, Amara, Obasi said, measured and careful. She is unmarried. She has no children who would be orphaned, no husband who would grieve her. Of every soul in this village, hers is the sacrifice that would tear apart the fewest lives. For a long moment, Nekem said nothing. Whatever weakness lived inside him, whatever selfishness had allowed him to overlook Amara's suffering for years, there remained at least a flicker of conscience. "No, absolutely not," he said, firmly, though his voice wavered. "She is my brother's daughter. I will not hand her over to be drowned." Chief Obasi had expected this resistance. He leaned forward, his voice dropping into something colder, something far more calculated. "Nekem, think carefully before you refuse," he said. "If the drought continues, the people will not blame the river, they will blame the elders who failed to act, and land can be seized from men who make enemies of the council." The threat was unmistakable, wrapped in polite language, but sharp as a blade beneath the surface. "And in return for Amara's sacrifice," Obasi added, softening his tone deliberately, "the council will ensure your farm receives the finest irrigation channels. Once the rains return, your children will never know hunger again." It was a bribe wrapped in the language of salvation, and Nekem, weak, frightened, unwilling to risk his own children's future, began to waver. "She is not truly my blood," he said quietly, ashamed even as he said it. "Not by birth. My brother married her mother, but Amara herself—" He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. In that unfinished excuse lived the whole ugly truth of what he was about to do, searching for any thin justification that might let him live with himself afterward. "Then it is settled?" Obasi asked, gently, patiently, like a man closing a trade. Nkem closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something in his face had changed. The last resistance drained out of him, replaced by the cold arithmetic of self-preservation. "Take her," he whispered, barely audible. Two words that would haunt him for the rest of his life, though in that moment, he told himself he had no other choice. What none of the three men realized was that Amara, returning early from the stream with a heavy pot balanced on her hip, had paused just beyond the compound wall, drawn by the unfamiliar voices of the chief and the elder inside her uncle's home. She had heard enough. Amara did not cry out. She did not drop the pot she carried. She simply stood frozen at the wall, the water inside the vessel trembling as her hands began to shake, understanding, with a clarity more painful than any blow, that the only family she had left had just chosen his farmland over her life. By evening, Amara was led, escorted with false gentleness, to a small storage hut at the edge of the compound, where the door was tied shut from outside. She sat alone in the darkness, knees pulled to her chest, listening to a household that continued its evening exactly as it always had. "Mother, why did you leave me alone?" she whispered into the dark, tears streaming down her face. "Why did you leave me with people who never wanted me?" Her hand found the necklace at her throat, the way it always did in her most desperate moments. She clutched it tightly, as though it might somehow answer her. "I don't understand what this necklace means," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't understand anything anymore. I only know that tomorrow I am going to die, and no one in this village will shed a single tear for me." As she wept, the dark stone at her throat began to glow, faint at first, then steadily brighter, casting soft light across her tear-streaked face. Outside, the clear sky rumbled with distant thunder, though there wasn't a single cloud. The village dogs began to howl. Somewhere far beyond the village, in the depths where the river still remembered every promise ever made to it, something ancient had begun to stir, something that had waited 7 long years for exactly this moment. Amara drifted into restless sleep, unaware the necklace had just sent a signal across realms she did not know existed. She is here. She is ready. Bring her home. Dawn arrived heavy and silent, the color of dried blood spreading slowly across the horizon. In the village square, the drums had already begun, not celebratory rhythms, but a slow, mournful beat, echoing the dread in every chest. The hut door was untied. Amara was led out, wrists bound loosely with rope, feet bare against the cold morning earth. She did not scream this time. She did not beg. Something inside her had gone quiet overnight, though her eyes, passing over the crowd, still burned with a grief too large for words. Women wept openly, pressing cloths to their faces, though none stepped forward to stop what was happening. Young men who had grown up beside her stood with heads bowed, their silence as damning as any accusation. "All of you watch them take everything from me," Amara said quietly, almost to herself as she walked. "And still, none of you will speak." No one answered. No one could meet her eyes. At the front of the procession walked Uncle Nentem, shoulders hunched, gaze fixed on the ground. He had not slept. His face had aged years in a single night. But he did not stop walking, and he did not turn around. "Uncle, look at me," she called out, one last time. "At least look at me before I go." He flinched at the sound of her voice. His steps faltered, just slightly, but he did not turn. It was, perhaps, the cruelest moment of the entire procession. Not the drums, not the silent crowd, not even the priest walking ahead with his staff raised. It was the sight of the one man who should have protected her, unable to summon even a final glance of acknowledgement. The path to the river had never felt so long. Amara walked it barefoot, memorizing the faces of a village that had decided, collectively, that her life mattered less than their comfort. By the time they reached the riverbank, the sun had fully risen, casting long shadows across the cracked earth. The priest stepped forward, his gourd of white chalk in hand. He dipped 2 fingers into the powder and drew a mark across Amara's forehead, murmuring words in a language older than the village itself. "River goddess of Oduwa, guardian of our waters, keeper of our covenant," he intoned, solemn and ritualistic, "we return to you what was always yours. Accept this offering, and let the rains fall once more upon your children." Amara closed her eyes. She thought of her mother's face, faded now with time but still warm in memory. She thought of the necklace resting against her chest, the only piece of family she had left that had never once betrayed her. "Whatever happens next, Mama," she whispered, eyes closed, "I hope I finally get to see you again." The men holding her arms guided her into the shallow edge of the water. Then, with the collective breath of an entire village suspended in dread, they pushed her beneath the surface. She sank. The villagers stood frozen at the bank, waiting for the water to accept the offering. But something began to happen that none of them expected. The water, murky and low from years of drought, began to glow, a soft golden light rising from beneath the surface, spreading outward in slow, deliberate ripples. "What is that?" a woman gasped. Fish that had not been seen in the river for years suddenly appeared, circling the spot where Amara had disappeared beneath the surface, moving in perfect, unnatural formation. The current, what little remained of it, stopped entirely. The water became a mirror, still and silent, reflecting a sky that had begun, impossibly, to gather clouds. And beneath the surface, though no one on the bank could see it, Amara's necklace erupted into brilliant light. Amara expected darkness, the burning panic of drowning. Instead, she opened her eyes to wonder. She was breathing, impossibly, effortlessly breathing. Around her stretched a world she could never have imagined beneath the humble river of her village, an underwater kingdom of staggering beauty. Golden pillars rose from pale sand, carved with symbols matching the crescent on her necklace. Ancient statues stood sentry along wide avenues, and plants, unlike anything she had ever seen, swayed gently, glowing with their own soft light. This cannot be real," she whispered, awestruck, forgetting her fear entirely. And then, from the golden light ahead of her, a figure began to take shape, tall, regal, her form woven from water and starlight, her eyes ancient beyond measure. The river goddess had come. "You were never meant to die here, Amara," she said, gentle and powerful. Amara stared, unable to find words. Fear and awe warred within her in equal measure. "Then why did they send me?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. "Why did my own village throw me into this water, believing I would die?" "Because the guilty feared the innocent," the goddess answered, with quiet, ancient sorrow. "Because for 7 years, the men who rule your village have hidden a crime so grave that they were willing to sacrifice a girl who had done nothing wrong, rather than let the truth surface." Amara felt something inside her chest loosen, not relief exactly, but the first flicker of understanding after years of confusion. "What crime? What are you talking about?" "Come," the goddess said, extending a hand, gesturing to the golden kingdom around them. "It is time you finally learned the truth of who you are, Amara, and why this village has been dying of thirst for 7 long years." Amara hesitated only a moment before following the goddess deeper into the underwater kingdom, leaving behind everything she thought she understood about her own life. The river goddess led Amara through the golden halls of the sunken kingdom until they reached a great chamber, its walls lined with shimmering images that moved and shifted like living memory. "Watch, child, and understand," the goddess said. The images came alive before Amara's eyes. Oduwa, as it once was, a kingdom ruled by a just and beloved royal family. A king in robes of deep indigo knelt at this very riverbank, making a solemn vow before the goddess herself. "Long before your grandmother's grandmother was born," the goddess narrated, her voice woven through the vision, "the first king of Oduwa made a sacred covenant with me. In exchange for his people's devotion and honesty, I would protect this land, its rains, its harvests, its rivers, for as long as his bloodline ruled with justice." The vision shifted, showing generations of prosperity, golden harvests, overflowing rivers, children laughing in fields that never once knew drought. "For centuries, the covenant held," the goddess's voice continued. "But covenants, like all sacred things, can be broken by those who forget their worth." The images darkened, shifting toward a more recent memory. Men she recognized, their faces younger but unmistakable, moving through shadow with the careful steps of thieves. "Chief Obasi." "Elder Bako," Amara gasped. "Yes," the goddess said, grave. "Watch closely." The vision showed a night 7 years past. Chief Obasi, younger then but no less ambitious, led a small group of trusted men through the darkness toward the sacred shrine forbidden to all but the royal bloodline. They descended into the shrine's hidden chamber, where 7 golden crowns rested upon stone pedestals, sacred relics that had never once been touched by unworthy hands. "I have never seen such gold in my life," the younger Elder Bako murmured in the vision, reverent despite himself. "Gather them." "All 7, the younger Chief Obasi said, coldly practical. "We melt down what we can sell quietly, and the rest we hide until the village forgets they ever existed." The men gathered the sacred crowns, unaware, or perhaps simply uncaring, that they were severing a bond 7 generations in the making. The moment those crowns left the shrine, the covenant shattered, the goddess said. The rains I had promised, generation after generation, could no longer be given. Not out of anger, Amara, but because the very foundation of the promise had been stolen away. Amara watched, horrified, as the vision showed the aftermath, the sky darkening not with rain but with the first cracks of drought, while Chief Obasi and his allies buried their stolen treasure and returned to the village as though nothing had happened. And rather than confess their crime, rather than return what they had stolen and beg forgiveness, the goddess continued, they chose instead to let an entire village suffer for 7 long years. They chose to let children go hungry, farmers lose everything they had built, families flee the only home they had ever known, all to protect their secret. They let everyone believe you had abandoned us, Amara said, furious, tears streaming. They let everyone believe I was worth sacrificing, all to hide what they had done. Yes, the goddess said gently, and now you understand why they feared you above all others. The vision faded, the chamber returning to quiet stillness. The river goddess turned to face Amara fully, her ancient eyes filled with something that looked, unmistakably, like tenderness. There is more you must know, Amara, more about yourself. Tell me, Amara said, bracing herself. Your mother was the daughter of the last true queen of Oduwa, the final descendant of the royal bloodline that once made this covenant with me. Amara staggered slightly, the weight of the revelation crashing over her like the very water surrounding them. That's impossible, she said, breathless. My mother was. We were poor. We had nothing. Your mother fled the palace when the old royal family was overthrown by ambitious men eager to seize power for themselves, the goddess said. She hid herself among the common people, raising you in secrecy, protecting you the only way she knew how. Amara's hand rose instinctively to the necklace at her throat, understanding now, for the first time, the true weight of what she had carried her entire life. That necklace you wear is the royal seal, passed down through generations of your family, worn only by those of true royal blood, the goddess went on. And the birthmark on your shoulder, the crescent mark you have carried since birth, confirms what your mother always knew and could never tell you. I am the last of the royal bloodline, Amara said, her voice trembling. You are Amara, the goddess said, nodding solemnly, the rightful heir to a throne that has been empty for far too long. Amara sank onto a stone bench, carved into the chamber floor, overwhelmed by everything she had just learned. Orphan, servant, sacrifice, and now, impossibly, queen. All my life, I was told I was worth nothing, she said quietly, almost to herself, that I had no family, no name, no value, and the entire time, your blood gave you a claim to the throne, Amara, the goddess said, sitting beside her, gently. But it was never your blood alone that made you worthy of saving. It was your heart. Amara looked up, confusion mixing with the beginning of understanding. I have watched you for years, long before you knew I was watching, the goddess continued. I watched you rise before dawn, to serve a family that never thanked you. I watched you remain kind, even when kindness was never returned. I didn't know what else to do, Amara said, tears falling freely now. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I was good enough, someone might finally love me. That goodness, Amara, unearned, unrewarded, unwavering, is rarer than any crown, more valuable than any golden relic those men stole from my shrine, the goddess said, with deep compassion. Your blood gave you a claim to the throne. Your heart made you worthy of it. The goddess rose, moving to a small alcove in the chamber wall, from which she retrieved a single gleaming object, a fragment, unmistakably part of one of the stolen crowns. Take this, it will serve as proof of what those men have done, evidence that cannot be denied once it is seen. Amara accepted the fragment with trembling hands, its weight heavier than its size suggested, carrying the burden of 7 years of stolen truth. "But hear me, Amara, and hear me carefully," the goddess added. "I am not sending you back to seek revenge. Revenge will only poison what should be a return to justice." "Then what do I do?" Amara asked, steadying herself. "Return to your people. Do not seek revenge. Let the truth expose itself, in its own time, in its own way. Justice does not require cruelty to be complete. It only requires honesty." Amara nodded slowly, tucking the fragment against her chest, beside the necklace that had, all along, been waiting for this moment. "Go now, daughter of the old queen," the goddess said, placing a gentle hand on Amara's shoulder. "Show them what a true heart looks like, even after everything they have done to break it." On the riverbank, the villagers had begun to disperse, faces heavy with the shame of what they had just done, though none dared speak it aloud. Uncle Ninkem lingered longest, staring at the still water as though some part of him hoped a miracle might undo what his cowardice had allowed. Then, impossibly, the water at the center of the river began to churn. "Look, something is happening," a man shouted, pointing, alarmed. The surface broke, and Amara rose from the water, not gasping, not drowning, not dead, alive, dry, though she had spent what felt like hours beneath the surface. Her necklace glowed faintly against her skin, the golden light slowly fading as she stepped onto the riverbank. For a long moment, no one moved, no one breathed. The entire crowd stood frozen, staring at a girl they had watched die only hours before, now standing before them, very much alive. "It's her! She's alive!" a woman screamed. Chaos erupted along the riverbank. Some villagers fell to their knees, whispering prayers of astonishment. Others scrambled backward in terror. Uncle Nenkem, closest to the water's edge, stumbled and fell into the mud, his face white with shock. "It cannot be," he whispered, trembling. "It cannot be possible." Amara said nothing. She simply stood at the water's edge, her eyes moving slowly across the crowd of people who had watched her drown without lifting a single hand to save her. The same crowd now staring at her as though she were a ghost, or worse, a curse. She did not smile. She did not cry. She simply stood, dripping wet but unharmed, and let them see her. As the crowd's shock deepened, clouds, real clouds, the first Oduwa had seen in 7 long years, began gathering with startling speed, dark and heavy with the promise the entire village had been praying for. A single drop of rain fell, striking the dry earth with a sound so unfamiliar that children flinched. Within moments, the sky opened completely, rain pouring down in great, generous sheets. The villagers began to cheer, lifting their faces to the sky, tears mixing freely with rain for the first time in years. "The sacrifice worked," Chief Obasi shouted, seizing the moment, raising his voice over the celebration. "The river has accepted our offering, and the rains have returned to Oduwa." The crowd's cheering grew louder, the elders' claims spreading through the celebration. But Amara said nothing. She simply turned her gaze toward Chief Obasi, her expression unreadable, and held it there long enough that his triumphant smile began to falter beneath the weight of her silence. He knew, in that moment, that she knew. The dramatic irony hung thick between them, the crowd celebrating a miracle they credited to sacrifice, while Amara stood soaked and silent, already carrying the truth that would soon unravel everything Chief Obasi had built his power upon. As the rain fell and the river began to rise, something golden washed up onto the muddy shore, half buried in the wet earth, but unmistakably deliberate in its placement. Mama Sade, an elderly woman who had spent decades of her youth serving in the old royal palace before its fall, pushed through the crowd, her old eyes narrowing at the object glinting in the mud. "By the ancestors," she breathed, kneeling slowly, picking up the object with trembling hands. It was a fragment of a golden crown, its craftsmanship unmistakably ancient, its surface engraved with the same crescent symbol Amara wore around her neck. "That belongs to the first queen," she whispered, awed. "I have not seen this symbol since I was a young woman serving in the palace, before it fell." Chief Obasi's face drained of color the moment his eyes landed on the golden fragment in Mama Sade's hands. He crossed the distance quickly, his voice sharp with barely controlled panic. "Give that to me," he said, too quickly, too forcefully. "It is nothing, likely just debris the river has stirred up." "This is no ordinary debris, Chief," Mama Sade said, pulling it back, suspicious now. "I know royal gold when I see it." Several villagers exchanged uneasy glances at his sudden urgency. Why, they began to wonder, would their chief be so eager to destroy something that might simply be an ancient artifact, unless it meant something far more dangerous to him? "Why is he in such a hurry to get rid of it?" one man murmured quietly to a neighbor. The seed of suspicion, small as it was, had been planted, and in the days ahead, it would grow into something Chief Obasi could no longer control. That evening, as the rain fell in steady, healing sheets, Mama Sade found Amara sitting alone beneath a large iroko tree at the edge of the village, still shaken from everything that had happened. "You are not who they told you that you were, child," she said, sitting carefully beside her. "What do you mean?" Amara asked, looking up, startled. Mama Sade studied Amara's face, her old eyes tracing features she had not seen in over 20 years, features belonging, unmistakably, to a family she had once served. "I served in the old royal palace, many years ago, before the family that ruled Oduwa was overthrown," she said. "I remember the young princess who disappeared during the uprising, a woman with your very eyes, your very bearing." "My mother?" Amara asked, breathless. "She vanished the night the palace fell," Mama Sad said, nodding slowly, "along with several loyal servants who helped smuggle her to safety. I always wondered what became of her. I never imagined I would live long enough to see her daughter standing before me." Amara reached beneath her wrapper and revealed the necklace, still faintly warm from whatever power had touched it beneath the river. "I have carried this my whole life," she said quietly. "My mother told me never to remove it, but she never explained why." Mama Sade's breath caught as her eyes fell upon the dark stone and its crescent symbol. "I have seen that seal before," she whispered, reverent. "It was worn by the queen herself, and by her mother before her. It is the mark of the true royal bloodline of Oduwa." Word of Mama Sade's recognition spread quickly through the village that evening, carried from hut to hut. By morning, nearly every household had heard some version of the rumor that the girl they had sacrificed might be far more than the orphan they had always believed her to be. Chief Obasi understood exactly how dangerous these rumors had become. By the following afternoon, he had gathered the village elders once more, his expression arranged into grave concern rather than the panic actually gripping him. "People of Oduwa," he announced, addressing the gathered crowd, his voice booming with false authority. "I have watched with growing concern as strange rumors spread through our village, rumors that threaten to unravel the very order that has protected us for generations." The villagers, many still soaked from the previous day's celebration, gathered uneasily, sensing something significant was about to unfold. This girl, Amara, returned from the river under circumstances none of us can fully explain, Obasi went on. "Such power is not a blessing. It is a warning. She has bewitched the very water that once obeyed our covenant with the goddess." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Amara felt every eye suddenly turn toward her with fresh suspicion. "That is not true," she said, stepping forward, indignant. "I did nothing but survive what you all threw me into." A girl does not simply survive drowning, then return glowing with unnatural light, unless dark forces are at work, Obasi said, raising his voice over hers. I call upon this council to arrest her before her witchcraft brings further ruin upon Oduwa. Elder Bako gestured to two village guards, who moved uncertainly toward Amara. Take her, he commanded, now, before she causes further harm. The crowd fractured immediately, some crying out in protest, remembering years of Amara's kindness, others gripped by superstitious fear. The guards reached her, hands closing uncertainly around her arms, just as the sky above Oduwa began, once more, to darken with unnatural speed. The wind rose suddenly, sharp and cold, scattering dust and loose thatch. From the river came a deep, rolling roar, the sound of water rising with tremendous, deliberate power. The guards holding Amara froze as the river, swollen from the previous day's rain, surged upward into a wall of shimmering water that hovered at the edge of the square, defying every law of nature the villagers understood. Enough, the goddess's voice boomed, filling the entire village. The crowd fell instantly silent, terror and awe rendering even the bravest among them speechless. Chief Obasi's face had gone the color of ash. For 7 years, this village has suffered, believing my covenant had been broken by their own unworthiness, the voice continued. But the truth is far darker than any of you have been told. Images began to form within the towering wall of water, visible to every soul gathered in the square. The same vision Amara had witnessed beneath the river, now shown to the entire village. 7 years ago, this man, Chief Obasi, and his ally, Elder Bako, entered my sacred shrine and stole 7 golden crowns, relics sealing the covenant between my waters and the royal bloodline of Oduwa. The vision showed clearly, unmistakably, the 2 men descending into the shrine, gathering the crowns, burying their theft in darkness and silence. When my reign stopped, it was not punishment for your sins, people of Oduwa, the goddess declared. It was the natural consequence of a broken promise, broken not by you, but by the very men who claimed to lead you, who then let you suffer for 7 years rather than confess their crime. Gasps and cries of outrage swept through the crowd as the truth, undeniable and vivid, played out before their eyes. And when they feared the last descendant of the true bloodline might one day discover their crime and reclaim what was rightfully hers, they chose to sacrifice an innocent girl rather than face the consequences of their own greed. The wall of water lowered slowly, gently, its roaring subsiding into a calm, steady flow that returned to the riverbed as though nothing unusual had occurred at all. But nothing about Oduwa would ever be the same again. The village square remained frozen in stunned silence, every eye now turned toward the 2 men who had, only moments before, been calling for her arrest. Chief Obasi's legs gave way. He sank to his knees in the mud, his authority crumbling as completely as the lie he had maintained for 7 long years. We stole the gold, he confessed, broken, defeated. The confession hung in the air over the square, undeniable now that it had finally been given voice. We were afraid, Elder Bako said, also collapsing, unable to maintain his composure any longer, of losing our standing, our influence, everything we had built. When the drought began, it was easier to blame the goddess than admit what we had done. The same villagers who, only days before, had watched silently as Amara was dragged toward her death, now turned on the elders with a fury born of 7 years of unnecessary suffering. Village guards, uncertain where their loyalty now belonged, made no move to protect them. Amara stood at the edge of the chaos, watching the men who had condemned her to die now kneel in the mud, exposed before the entire village. She felt no satisfaction in their downfall, only the quiet, aching relief of a truth finally allowed to breathe. In the days that followed, Oduwa transformed with a speed that matched the urgency of 7 lost years finally being reclaimed. Chief Obasi and Elder Bako were stripped of their positions, their authority dissolved by unanimous agreement. What remained of the stolen gold, hidden away for 7 years, was recovered and returned toward the restoration of the sacred shrine. The village, once divided by fear, began the slow work of rebuilding, not just its farms and wells, but the trust that 7 years of lies had nearly destroyed. The council gathered publicly to offer Amara a formal apology, an acknowledgement, however late, of the grave injustice she had suffered. On behalf of this council and this entire village, we ask your forgiveness, one elder said, bowing before her. We allowed fear and false leadership to blind us to a truth we should have questioned from the beginning. Amara accepted the apology with quiet grace, though the deepest wound of all remained unaddressed, the betrayal of the one person who should never have let her walk toward that river at all. Uncle Nikim approached last, his usual confidence gone, replaced by a shame so heavy it seemed to bend his posture. Amara, I have no right to ask this of you, he said, kneeling before her, his voice breaking. I chose my farm, my comfort, over your life. I have relived that choice every hour since, and I will carry the shame of it until I die. But I am asking you anyway, can you ever forgive me? Amara looked down at the man who had raised her, imperfectly, and, in the end, unforgivably, yet who had also fed her and given her a home when he had no obligation to. She was faced now with a choice far more difficult than any she had confronted beneath the river's golden halls. The entire village square fell silent, waiting to see what judgment the last daughter of Oduwa's bloodline would deliver to the man who had betrayed her most deeply. You gave me to the river because you believed I had no value, she said, quietly, steadily. Uncle Kem flinched, but did not look away, accepting whatever judgment was to come. But the river taught me something, she went on, pausing, gathering herself. A person does not become valuable because they wear a crown. I was valuable when I woke before dawn to fetch water for a family that mocked me. I was valuable when I remained kind to people who gave me every reason to become bitter. My worth was never something any of you had the power to grant or take away. Tears streamed freely down Amara's face now, though her voice remained steady, strengthened rather than weakened by the emotion behind it. I forgive you, Uncle, she said. A collective breath seemed to release across the crowd. Uncle Nukem broke into quiet, grateful sobs, pressing his forehead to the ground before her. Turning, addressing the wider council, she went on. But my forgiveness for my uncle's fear does not extend to the men who orchestrated this crime for their own gain. Chief Obasi and Elder Bako stole from this entire village, not only gold, but 7 years of rain, of harvests, of childhood spent hungry when they need not have been. Forgiveness does not mean the absence of consequence. Let them face the justice this council has already determined they deserve. Weeks passed. The rains continued in gentle, healing rhythms, and the fields of Oduwa, dormant for 7 long years, began to blossom with a fertility the village had nearly forgotten was possible. On the day the sacred shrine was finally restored, the entire village gathered at the riverbank for a ceremony none of them could have imagined only a season before. Mama Sade approached Amara, carrying the restored royal crown, its gold polished to a brilliance that caught the afternoon light. People of Oduwa, she said, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd, before you stands the last daughter of our true royal bloodline, a girl this village once condemned to die, who returned instead to save us all. Amara knelt before the riverbank, her eyes closed, the weight of everything she had endured settling into something that finally, after 20 years, felt like peace. "Rise, Queen Amara of Oduwa," Mama Sade said, placing the crown gently upon Amara's head. The village erupted into celebration unlike anything Oduwa had witnessed in generations, drums that had once beaten mournfully, now pounding with joy, children dancing freely in fields that had, at last, remembered how to grow green. Amara rose to her feet, the crown resting upon her head with a weight that felt lighter than the years of servitude that had come before it. She looked out across the village that had once thrown her away, now looking back at her with something entirely new, not pity, but genuine, hard-earned respect. That evening, after the celebrations had quieted, Amara made her way alone to the riverbank, drawn by a pull she had come to recognize as sacred. She stood at the water's edge, the crown resting upon her head, the necklace glowing softly against her chest in the fading light. The surface of the river rippled gently, and the river goddess appeared once more, her form shimmering in the last light of day. "They called you a sacrifice, Amara," she said, warm, almost proud. "The river knew you were a queen." Amara smiled, the first truly unburdened smile she had allowed herself in longer than she could remember. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing what no one else in this village ever could." "I did not create your worth, child," the goddess said gently. "I only revealed what was already there, waiting for the world to finally see it." The goddess's form began to dissolve back into the current, fading like mist beneath the rising moon. "Rule well, Queen Amara," she said, her final words echoing softly. "And remember always, the crown does not make the heart. The heart makes the crown worth wearing." And then she was gone, leaving only the quiet murmur of the river, flowing steadily onward, as it had for generations before, and would for generations still to come. The village of Oduwa thought sacrificing an innocent girl would save them. But the truth was simpler and harder to accept. Their suffering had never come from the river's anger. It had come from their own leader's greed, hidden for 7 long years, behind lies too comfortable to question. Amara survived because she was protected by something far stronger than power, far stronger than gold, far stronger than any crown stolen or given. She survived because of truth, because of courage, and because, even after every cruelty this world offered her, she refused to let her heart grow as cold as the people who wronged her. If you were Amara, would you have forgiven the uncle who gave you to the river, or demanded punishment? Tell us what you would have done in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And stay close, because more stories from this side of the continent are on the way.